Black Yellow Luffy into Red Black Sabo. This is actually a pretty interesting matchup, as Red Black Sabo is pretty resilient at making sure things stay alive, as they can attach one Don to their lead and protect something. We'll see how well I can do this. Red Black Sabo also potentially runs Rush Luffy, which is a pretty intense threat against this deck, because Rush Luffy, once you attach 2 Don to it, it can't be blocked, and that's kind of the gimmick of Black Yellow Luffy, is kind of just hanging out at 0 or 1 life with a bunch of blockers. So with the potential of them getting around that, it's a little scary. We had a pretty good hand here. We had a Sabo in hand, as well as 2 Searchers and an Ice Age and a 2K, so we're going to go ahead and play it. We played out the Garp, grabbed a Rocket Luffy, and then next turn we're probably going to search again potentially, or we're just going to push damage here. I know that, you know, the potential end game for Red Black Sabo is just to like send in a bunch of unblockable threats, and I don't really want to get that far potentially into the game, so I'm probably going to get pretty aggressive here and instead just like swing out both with my Garp and with my leader to try to either get some cards out of hand or potentially deal some damage to the opponent's leader. Honestly, kind of hoping we just get cards out of hand here, because Black Red Sabo protects something the first time, it's basically going to make me have to kill things twice to sort of ensure that they don't have as much counter in their hand to potentially counter out of a second attack. If I do try to pop something first, will end up being pretty nice in the long run. He does give me a 1K and a 2K out of those 2 attacks here, going over his forward on turn. I have the Rocket Luffy in hand, I've got a Gecko in hand, I've got a Searcher, the Black Sabo blocker. I'm like set up pretty well to like cruise into like the mid to late game here. It just depends on how aggressive the opponent wants to be. They're going to play out a Rush Zoro here, going to attach 1 to lead. That means that Zoro is nigh unkillable. He's going to go ahead and send 5 into my Garp, and then he's going to send 6 at lead here. He could have potentially instead sent the Bello Betty into my Garp here. They're both 2,000 power characters. It would have basically forced me to counter out of hand, and I don't typically want to give cards out of hand, so I would have probably just let that go, and that would have been 2 5K, a 5K and a 6K at lead instead, but elects to hold that Bello Betty back, maybe for potential play later on. Stack some Dawn on it. Again, this is one piece. You can basically make any small threat into a big threat with just a little bit of Dawn. We're going to go ahead and play out the Sabo blocker. He's going to cycle 2 cards here, try to help me find a better hand. I pick up a second Gecko, as well as another child here. Looking at that Ice Age maybe not as impactful in this specific matchup. There's not a lot of like must kill threats that I can't already potentially kill with just my Rocket Luffys. I guess the one exception, like 2 exceptions, there's Dragon, which is like an 8 cost I think, and then the 5 cost Luffy. I would have to use like an Ice Age to kill that potentially, but because he's Red Black Sabo, the first kill is always free, right? Because he'll stop the KO, so I have to try again. So ultimately that card's out of hand, and then I had 2 Luffy, so just go ahead and pitch 1 Luffy. Kind of want to keep those Geckos in hand, as that'll allow me to kind of take over as we get towards the end of the game here. There is one threat that I do not like to see, that is that Rush Luffy. He's going to go ahead and swing at me with 6K. I'm going to elect to take it. I'm pretty flexible about taking a lot of hits early here, though in hindsight maybe I shouldn't have taken necessarily as many hits as I did so early into the game. I am thinking potentially if I wanted to use my my leader ability next turn to potentially like play out a Luffy from life, something like that, to go to 7K. We're going to go ahead and take the 6K, and then he's going to pass the turn. I do have a Rocket Luffy that I could potentially play. I could use the Flampe in hand to go down to 0 life. Once I'm at 0 life, Black Yellow Luffy's leader ability allows me to attach 2 Dawn, discard a card, and then I can put 2 5 costs, either from my hand or my trash, into my life face up. And that's kind of the combo of this deck. It allows you to play your little baby versions of your characters, like Baby Luffy, Baby Ace, Baby Sabo. And basically those babies check to see what is on top of life. And if that is a character that has the same name as them that costs 5, you get to immediately put that character into play from your life. And then your leader gets buffed up by 2,000 power for each instance that happens. I'm going to go ahead and play out a Flampe. Flampe is going to allow me to go to 0 life here. I do have 6 more Dawn I can play with. I could attach 2 to lead. I could discard a card, put some life in there, and then maybe have some fun with it. So we're going to go ahead and potentially do that here. We're going to discard. Typically, I like to discard the card, one of the cards I'm going to put into life, because you can add cards from your hand. I was just asking a question about the leader effect, saying that maybe it was a little awkward because I can't really do anything crazy. I'm going to discard a Sabo, and then as part of Luffy's effect, we're going to take the Sabo and the Luffy from hand, and we're going to put them into our life face up. One caveat of Black Yellow Luffy, if you don't know, if I would take any damage while I have face-up life, that life is put on the bottom of my deck and is not added to my hand and does not trigger. I'm going to play out that Luffy from hand. I'm going to activate it, putting that big Luffy into play, and then buffing my leader by 2,000. Nice little token printed by a friend of mine, little 3D printed project of his. I do have the Kid Sabo as well, if I wanted to just go ahead and go up to 9k here. There is the potential for that Luffy to kind of check me here, but that Sabo could cycle me into a few more 2Ks. I think right now I have, what, 2 2Ks in hand to potentially stop like a full-out swing, and I think I'm just going to go ahead and do it here. Maybe in hindsight, maybe it wasn't the best play, but I did feel like pretty confident going, you know, to a 9,000 leader on my opponent's turn, and then potentially drawing into some things here. We are going to discard some non-counter, right? Because we're a little afraid, right? So we're going to discard the event. We're going to discard a gecko. I already had 3 total geckos in hand. That's kind of crazy. And then we're going to go ahead and send 11. We're going to send 11 at Luffy here. He's going to use Luffy's effect. And then I decided to pop the Zoro here with my Rocket Luffy. So you always have to check them, right, when they're playing Red Black Sabo. You gotta get them to use it on something, and then you could potentially kill something else, which is exactly what I did there. Because I knew 100% he was just going to use it especially when I attacked his Luffy, because that Luffy is very scary. He's at 8 Dawn here. He could attach and go 14 lead, which is honestly kind of scary. I do have 3 2Ks that I thumbed to the front of my hand. That Luffy actually found me another 2K, because that Rocket Luffy draws me a card if I'm at 2 or less life when I activate it. So I'm going to go up to 11, 13, and then go up to 15. I'm going to counter out of that 14k swing with an unblockable Luffy. My opponent was really hoping that he had the game there, but luckily I was able to survive, and I'm not going to make that same mistake again. Pretty much every turn that I activate my Luffy at this point, I'm going to make sure that I leave at least 1 Dawn up, or not 1 Dawn up, leave at least 1 life still in my life. That way I don't get got by something like this. But I think this turn, potentially, I might try to kill or KO that Luffy going through, because the opponent did not attach a Dawn to his leader. Sabo's leader effect is not active, so that Luffy is not protected from 1 KO. So really, he's just a 6k body that I could potentially swing into here. Thumbing my hand, I have 3 Gecko Morias in hand. I'm 1 turn off from like my big play, right? Because you need 10 Dawn, 2 Dawn to attach to your leader, discard a card from hand, and then you can play out Gecko Moria. Gecko Moria can get 2 babies back, which basically allow you to go up to 9k, get the 2 characters in board, because your babies will match what's in your life. We're going to do Garp here. Garp is going to find, I think we're just going to find a 3rd Sabo here. Sabo, again, not very great in this matchup, because it is a lot of like rush and a lot of unblockable rush, but a great way for me to still cycle my hand, right? It's not as good as it is against black. But again, I have so many Morias in my hand, I might use the Sabo here to cycle out of these Morias. This is kind of crazy. I have 2 Luffys in hand, baby Luffys, so I could use my leader ability to discard like the Gecko, and then like put 2 Luffys for my trash into life, and then play 1 out to make my leader a 7k. So yeah, we're gonna discard the Gecko here, because 3 Geckos, a little too many in hand here, especially with how aggressive my opponent's being. And we're gonna just take that. Yep. So we're gonna take the Sabo from my hand and that Rocket Luffy, and then we're gonna probably play out that Luffy just to make myself a 7k on my opponent's turn, which is gonna make it a little harder for him to attack to, especially if I intend on killing the Luffy this turn. That leaves him with just a leader swing and a Bello Betty, and I'm going to try to make sure that I'm at least at 1 life going into my opponent's turn. We're going to play out that baby Luffy. Baby Luffy is going to activate, going to give me 2,000, take me up to 7,000, and then now I have potentially another attacker. I could just use it to clean up the Bello Betty as well and cycle a card, because I could always potentially get it back next turn, especially with 2 Morios in hand. We're going to go ahead and send 9k at the Luffy here, requiring 4k counter to get out of. He's going to kick course, and then he's going to show me 1k to get out of it, and then I'm going to swing 10k at it, right? If he has like 2 2ks and a 1k, which is be his whole hand, he could save it, but he doesn't exactly have that, so I did manage to take out the Luffy there. And then I'm going to go ahead and do exactly what I said I was going to do. I'm going to just avoid all threats, and I'm going to just pop that Bello Betty, because I am not gonna let anything swing at me and try to take any of my precious resources at this point. So I'm just gonna completely starve the opponent out. Opponent's still at 3 life here. I have 1 blocker up, 1 life. So even if he played like a Rush Luffy with unblockable, just take the life. Again, in this deck, if you take a life that's face up, it just goes to the bottom of your deck. So goodbye to that Sabo. I still got 2 more. But we'll see here what the opponent decides to do. I think opponent asking kind of what was in my graveyard or my trash. I said like, 2 geckos. Don't worry anything about it, right? Potentially, I don't have 2 more in my hand. Gonna play out another Bella Betty. Bella Betty here, potentially gonna find himself a threat. Some annoying threats at this point are things like Dragon, Karasu can also be a threat. Karasu gives -1,000 power to your leader on your turn, to your opponent's leader, so it could take me down to 6k or a 4k if I like not combo off. There's a Karasu that's a little annoying potentially if you played it out, but I'm not too upset with it because I know next turn I'm going to potentially go into a 9k lead or something like that. He's going to play out a Kid Killer, another scary card into Black Yellow Luffy, as Kid Killer is a 7k attacker if your opponent has 2 or less life, and it has Rush. Luckily, I am kind of prepared for a little bit of nonsense because I again have a blocker up as well as 1 life. So it's gonna take a few swings to get through to me here, especially with I think I have like I'm a 7k leader and I also have like 2k in hand, potentially 2 cards in hand that have counters. Kind of very aggressively flipping those cards at this point. I'm so sorry. So I've actually ordered a little like card tray for my hand to prevent the intense flippies. All right, I don't know why I do it, but probably something to do with ADHD. All right, attaches a Don to Sabo. He's gonna go ahead and play out a Zoro, and then he's gonna swing 8k at lead, or swing 8k at my Sabo. I'm just going to let it go, and then potentially that Zoro's just going to sit up for potentially next turn because, again, I'm a 7k lead. That Sabo also can't attack because, again, I'm a 7k lead. That is kind of the dealio of this specific deck, is you're just going to typically sit at higher power totals on your opponent's turn for your leader, so it's going to make their swings really awkward unless they have a lot of very large characters. I have Gecko. I'm at like the premium turn. All right, I have Gecko Moria. I have some babies in my yard that match up with some cards I had in my life, and I'm gonna go ahead and play out the Moria. So since I have 1 life already on my leader, or like 1 life up, I can't activate my leader's ability. But what I can do is still play out Moria and bring back the children, and then I can kind of sequence it to where I activate Luffy or activate Sabo here to put Sabo into play, and then I can activate my leader ability by attaching to Don and put 2 more targets into life, and then activate my Luffy, and then I would still have 1 life. So it still plays around the fact that they could have a unblockable Luffy, right? Because I still am at 1 life. And so here now I'm just trying to think, what do I want to discard here? Off my Sabo play, I almost discarded 3 cards there. Just kind of deciding what I want to do. I think I decide here at this point that it's worthwhile to just pitch the 3rd Gecko and instead just kind of play it out here and try to go for game in the next 2 turns. We'll discard this Luffy, and then we're gonna gain 2 life. We're just gonna shove 2 Luffys at the top of our life, I think is the goal here. Yep, 2 Luffys. Maybe in hindsight it was not worth throwing away the final Gecko here, as it doesn't let me play it again. But I do have that Luffy in hand still, so ultimately it probably doesn't matter. I could activate the Luffy, play out the Rocket Luffy, and I could potentially just pressure Kid Killer here, right? So we could send send an attacker at Kid Killer. We're thinking about it here. Getting feisty potentially with our Sabo. We can send 6k into Kid Killer, and then force him to either 2k from hand or use his leader ability, and then clean it up with something else, or pop it. So we're actually going to just go ahead and swing 9k into Kid Killer. He's going to use the effect to save it. I'm going to play out the Luffy, go up to 11k leader, and then I'm going to activate and pop Rocket Luffy to pop the Kid Killer. And then now I'm going to pass to my opponent. I have 2 blockers up, 1 life, and I'm a 9k leader. I am feeling pretty confident going into this and potentially being able to kill the opponent next turn, because I have several swings, I have a lot of Dawn to work with, and my opponent only has 3 cards in hand, right? And we know from previous attacking that they're likely not 2Ks. So we can potentially play around that with some nice little 7K swings. If you don't know, 7K swings are a nice way to get at least 2 cards minimum out of someone's hand, which is pretty nice. So especially with only 2 cards in hand. We can kind of expect that maybe he'll counter the first one, and then he'll just take all the other ones. He's going to play a Monkey D Dragon. Dragon's a big scary threat here, especially if I didn't have any blockers, but since I have blockers, I'm not that afraid. His effect allows him to attach 2 Rested Dawn to a character or leader. He's going to attach it to Sabo, and then attach 2 Dawn that he had left open to his leader or to his character, and he's going to swing. I think that's it's either a 9k attack or 11k. I'm just going to go to 12, so I'll just counter out of it. Basically saying like, hey, I'm going to try to go for lethal this turn because I want my blockers to stay alive. I need every swing I can get here to potentially kill you, just because I did decide to throw away that gecko. I did kind of like force myself to be in this specific position at this point, whereas if I kept the gecko, I wouldn't have been in this position at all, potentially. But ultimately, you got to go for game at some point. With only 2 cards in hand, I'm feeling pretty confident potentially here. I also have a baby Luffy in hand, which is kind of like a free 2k, right? I could attach 2 to my lead, or I could play out the baby Luffy and get 7k, make my lead a 7k either way. So it kind of represents the same thing. But if I do manage to fail this lethal, potentially I could instead just be like a 7k leader next turn. And I have like a potential backup plan of like attaching Zebdon, going back up to 2 life. And you know, I might potentially attack in a way where I'm forcing things out of my opponent's hands. I'm going to go ahead and just stay, it's very simple. I'm going to swing 5, right? Kind of basically try to slide one under the window here. Very, very easy check, especially if your opponent has 2 cards in hand. Maybe they don't want to give something up. We're going to go ahead and play out the baby Luffy here. Baby Luffy going to make me a 7k lead. And then now I have like the ability, if I wanted to attach to my leader, and then like use the ability to just go back up to 2 life if I really wanted to, if I'm feeling a little afraid. And then activate Monkey D Luffy's like the 5 cost ability, which basically allows me to give it 8,000 power, or take it up to 8,000 power for the turn. I'm going to go ahead and activate leader ability. We're going to go ahead and put 2 things back into life here. These are throwaway targets at this point. This is just like a safety, a safe maneuver that I'm making potentially to if I decided I didn't want to go for game here. But I am at a 9k leader. I still have like 9k. I could potentially go 9k, 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 and then still have a Sabo up and still have 2 life, which is like maybe enough, but that Bella Betty is a little threatening. He's going to go ahead and take the 9k. I'm going to go ahead and just send another 9k. I'm going to say, all right, show me 3 cards. Show me. So he shows me 3 cards, right? He shows me 2k, 2k, 1k. And then I go, okay, pass to you. And so I decide, you know, at this point, I'm just going to have 2 blockers. I'm going to have 2 life. I'm going to be a 7k lead, 1 card in hand, which is a 2k. And I'm going to basically say, all right, I tried to like partially go for game last turn. He showed me what he had. I attacked in a way to where I wouldn't like lose the game on the crackback, right? Didn't swing with the blockers unless I needed to, and I decided I didn't need to at that point. He's going to go ahead and play a Sabo blocker out, and he's only got 1 card in hand, so he's just going to draw 2 and then trash 2 of the cards and then go back to 1 card. He just trashes the 2 cards that he draws, as they're probably not as useful as what's in his hand at this point. And then he's going to look at his Don here. He's got 5 more Don to work with. He just unfortunately does not have enough swings at this point to finish me off. If he had like a rusher, there was a potential for him to have exactly what he needed, but ultimately he didn't have it at this point. This game is pretty much sealed up at this point. He's got 1 card in hand. He's got 1 life, and I have a pretty full board as well as some blockers. I'm just gonna go ahead and take that hit. That was a 10k hit. I'm just gonna take it, whatever. That life is useless to me at this point. And then I'm going to likely just whatever big hits he throws at me, I'm just gonna take. So that's just another 8k at lead, or no, that's an 8k at Garp. So opponent's trying to potentially now take me off my lethal potentially, but I just have so many threats on board that it really just at this point probably doesn't matter. Going back up to 10 Don, I've got a 9k on board. I have a potential 8k on board if I activate its effect, 2 6ks and a 5k with 10 Don. That's enough to squeak out a victory for sure. Opponent with only 1 blocker. I'm going to activate Luffy's ability. We're going to trash the top card of my life, and then I draw a card off of Luffy's effect. If I had lean life, we're going to just draw a Thunderbolt. Thunderbolt's not very useful here. And then I'm going to go ahead and basically position it out to be able to go like 9k, 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 9k. Right, with 1 card and then drawing a card, he's not going to have enough to stop that. We can go ahead and just piece it out. So 7k lead. If you got 1 card in hand, you can't counter out of unless you have like Don up in an event. And then I'm gonna go ahead and go 8k lead. And so I'm just like stair stepping him here. He says that's game, and then I go, hey, you have a blocker. So then he blocks with it, and then he shows me, and I send the rest at lead, and that's game. Pretty scary in the beginning, but honestly, we were able to squeak it out, and that was it for this match. If you enjoyed this type of content, feel free to subscribe. If not, also leave a like. Thanks for watching, everybody.